everybody, and welcome to the world's favorite youth baseball podcast, Clearing the Basics, featuring Coach Jimmy Filangieri. I'm David Friedman. I want to thank you for coming along this ride with us. How are we doing today, Coach?
Doing good, Dave. Just coming off doing a 2-week clinic for Little League guys, 8 to 12.
Oh, very nice, very nice. How'd that work out?
I got to tell you, I enjoyed it immensely. I mean, had fun with the boys. The boys seemed to be having a good time. Starting out with just basic stuff, four-seam grip, doing a little catch play with them, working on their hitting, their fielding, all of the very basic stuff. And the feedback was good. Everybody seemed to enjoy what we were doing. And yeah, I mean, I looked at it like it was like a dry run for my evolution baseball stuff that I'm working on. And I think it was a good first step.
Well, that's good. I was going to say something like it's almost like you're planning to start up a facility or a program yourself.
Well, yeah, definitely not a facility. I'm not that crazy. Okay, but, the program, yes, I want to start working with young kids, 13, 14 years old. We've talked about it a million times, about how the basics of the game, the rudimentary things are missing from players, and I want to start giving back a little bit and start teaching it to younger guys.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, I figure that the more I could teach and prepare them for high school, then the better off everyone will be.
Well, yeah, we talk quite often, not just us, obviously a lot of our guests talk about the lack of basic fundamentals that we're seeing at our kids that are our level. And it shouldn't be starting at age 15 where you're learning how to put a bunt down to the first base side.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the first things I did was took them out and started working with them on taking leads off of first base, for the 12-year-olds, because they need to know that. It's funny because it's a basic thing. It's very simple. So each night I would do it, and by the time we were done with the clinic, I wouldn't have to say a word. They're fine. Everything was the way it should be. So it just goes to show how with very little effort on the part of the coach, you could condition players to do what they're supposed to be doing. But I guess really what it comes down to is you have to know what to teach, how to teach it to them so they understand, and they'll get better as time goes by. But my whole thing is that if we took amateur coaches and we gave them this information, okay, again, simple, rudimentary things, and give them this information, they can do it, and it would be a better world for these kids.
Yeah, but how many games did you play over those 2 weeks? Because the kids just want to play games, Jimmy.
Oh God, yeah,
playing games. Isn't that more important than learning the fundamentals?
Yeah, we played 0 games, none.
Well, that doesn't track.
And I mean, I'll tell you, Dave, in all honesty, kids were laughing, joking. They genuinely seemed to be having a good time. And yeah, we didn't have to play a game. It's just, you know what? I think that a lot of it has to do with encouragement is a big thing. You know how I am. I'm encouraging the kids. All right, that's good. Little gains in anything we were teaching was rewarded. Not looked at like, oh, this kid's never going to get this. What am I doing? Waste of time. No, the kid did something good. Reward him.
Right. No, that's awesome. Hopefully they stick with it and can follow up with it on whatever team, whatever coaches that they're on, and they don't just jump into fall ball where they're playing games once a week and not practicing.
Yeah.
Because we all know that as quickly as they may have learned it, they'll unlearn it.
Yeah, that's true.
Without it being reinforced, and that goes back to the whole coaching the coaches thing to make sure that they're doing the same types of things. So hopefully there was a number of parents and coaches that stuck around and were taking notes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we could hope for. And who knows, maybe in the future, put these things together where we tell them, hey, coaches, dads, come out on the field. Come and help out.
Right.
This way you could learn.
Train the trainers.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of getting kids ready for the next level, let's talk about the next level in high school. So you and I are JV coaches, and we have the pleasure of being joined this week by a varsity coach. Anybody in particular that you might be familiar with?
Oh, yeah, this is not just any varsity coach. I mean, come on. This is the Stepinac High School varsity coach, Keith Richardson. How about that?
Keith Richardson. I've heard a few things about that guy. Where do I know that name from?
Well, let's put it this way. He might be a little bit crazy because he hired me as his JV coach, but I'm forever grateful for that. And, look, this will be a good opportunity for everybody to get a little bit of insight into the type of program that we have at the school. I feel that Keith is probably the guy to explain it rather than me. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's got a wealth of experience, not just from a coaching standpoint, playing. He's quite a bit younger than you or I, so being able to relate maybe even a little bit better to the kids because it's a little bit different generational wise. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say and digging into a little bit more of how did he come about hiring Coach Jimmy Filangieri.
I don't know.
See if he wants. We'll see if he wants to divulge any of those secrets.
Well, you got to look at it this way. Everybody has an off day, so he might have had an off day. Who knows?
Hey, come on now. Everything's working out well from everything that I hear from you. So let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Without further ado, let's bring on Coach Keith Richardson. So welcome, Coach. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys having me on.
I got to tell you, Dave, this is a treat for me. We've had on several high school coaches. I think that you'll find out that he has a lot to share, and he's got a lot of good stuff.
Well, I'm sure I've heard nothing but good things about him. So the first question I have actually is for you, Jimmy. Did you tell him that you're putting your notice in yet?
I knew I could count on you for something.
Anyway, yeah, Jimmy brings the technical stuff. I bring the humor.
All right, so let's get started here. Let's give a little bit about Stepinac High School. So Stepinac Baseball competes in the New York State Catholic High School Athletic Association, and that league happens to be one of the top leagues in New York. And Stepinac has a very long and proud tradition of success in that league. Keith, you started coaching when? 2007?
I started coaching in 2003.
Wow.
Yeah, going on year 20.
Wow.
You must have started when you were like 14 then.
I've never met you, Dave, but I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I was a couple of years out of college when I started coaching, and obviously been doing it ever since. So been a huge part of my life here for the last 20 years or so.
And did your playing career have a lot of influence on you wanting to be a coach?
Oh, definitely. Played baseball my whole life. Grew up in the Bronx. Played in a great little league in Frogs Neck Little League. Went out to play actually in the Catholic High School League that Jimmy brought up at Mount St. Michael in the Bronx. Had a great experience there. Moved on to play baseball at the college level, Division I baseball at Pace University, which was just a great experience for me. I met some of the best friends to this day of my life. Playing baseball, going to school, the whole college experience was an amazing thing. And then after a little kind of detour in my career path, ended up getting into teaching and coaching, which was what I've been doing ever since. So it's been a passion. It's been a joy. Obviously a lot of work and a lot of time that goes into it, but it's a great thing for me to be involved in baseball this long.
Now, you haven't always been a high school coach. You did some coaching at the college level, didn't you?
Yes, I actually coached back at my alma mater at Pace for my former coach, Hank Manning, which was a great experience for me. The timing of it, I had just had my first child. So being on the road, the recruiting aspect of it and all that kind of stuff was not an ideal timing for me, but I loved it. I loved working at that level. So after that, I ended up getting offered the assistant athletic director position at Stepinac, which had me return back and at the high school level and coaching there.
You were coaching at Pace before you became a teacher at the high school. Is that correct?
No, I mean, I don't want to take too much time, but I'll run you back a little bit on how this happened. I started teaching at Stepinac after working at a bank for a couple of years, believe it or not. putting a suit and tie on was not my thing every day of the week. I ended up getting involved with coaching through a couple of really good friends of mine that I grew up with that were working at Stepinac. Eric Lang was the head coach at the time. A good friend of mine that I grew up with, also a Mount St. Michael grad. And one of my best friends was coaching the JV. So he had asked me for just some help while I was working my other job. I would come down on the weekends and try to help whenever I could. That somehow parlayed into teaching, going back to school for my teaching degree and coaching. I did leave at one point where I was teaching at Stepinac, coaching at Pace, before returning as the assistant AD and back to coaching, which I've been doing here now for, like I said, 20 years total, but with that AD position over a decade now.
As far as your coaching goes, who was the biggest influence?
There's been a lot. I think a lot of the coaching aspect of this came from, as Dave said, as a player, having my experiences as a player. I was really fortunate to have some really good people around me when I was young, at the little league level, youth sports, that kind of thing. I had a great experience, like I said, at Mount St. Michael with some great coaches around us. And then at the collegiate level, I actually split some time. I had a real old-time coach, Coach Calicone, for my first 2 years. And then Coach Manning took over at Pace for my last 2 years. He had just finished playing at the AAA level, so it was really a pleasure to have somebody with that kind of experience, pro-level experience, come in to learn under. And then obviously coaching under him was a big learning tool for me. But really some of my best friends that I coached with at Stepinac were big influences on me. I mentioned Eric Lang. He's a Division I hockey coach right now, probably one of the best coaching minds that I've been around for, still a resource and a mentor to me. Coach Pat Duffy was the head varsity coach at Stepinac before I took over. I was his assistant for years. Our athletic department is filled with some guys who've had tons of experience, like Coach O'Donnell in our football program for decades. So I think just overall kind of getting that little feel for different people and how they do things and picking things up along the way. I think that's kind of the best way I can explain it, is I'm taking everything that I possibly can along the way here to try to do the best job that I can.
And now, so you mentioned, coaching from different sports, hockey, whatnot. Is that something, have you coached also with the other sports, or did you play other sports growing up, or were you primarily a ball player?
I played all sports growing up, played football, basketball, hockey, baseball. When I got to high school, I played hockey and baseball. And then obviously at college, I continued to play baseball. Only at the youth level did I coach any other sports. I was actually, when I was a young football player, coaching some of the younger levels, believe it or not. But really, baseball has been the coaching end of it for me, sticking with baseball.
All right. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about as the head coach with a successful program, and you guys have such a big program, one of the things that I've kind of marveled at over the years. So I was coaching at a small high school up here in Dutchess County, did that for the last 3 years on the JV level. And the number of players you guys cut is bigger than the number of players we have on our teams here. So it's frequent that we have ninth graders that make varsity. It's occasionally even an eighth grader because of how small the pool is that we have to pull from. So I don't know if you want to talk about, when you're dealing with that many kids, obviously having a proper network of coaches underneath you. You have your freshman team, your JV team. You've obviously struck out on the whole JV thing. Hopefully you're, making up for it with your freshman coach. But how do you go about your process in picking those that you're going to be working with as you move along? Because obviously, just to circle back, that's how you get your team, is by the feeding that's going on there. So that's vital to you getting a good, successful program.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think you touched on a couple of things, but we're fortunate enough to have a program that a lot of kids are interested in playing in. So yeah, that leads to a lot of numbers. That becomes a number crunch when it comes to cutting teams down. And that's always, I tell them all the time, every year, it's the least favorite part of coaching. It's a part that I hate. Just with the numbers that we have, it's a necessity, but certainly something that we don't take lightly. And it's a really difficult task. But as you said, we rely on our entire staff. Being the type of program that we are, we're lucky enough to have a great staff, Jimmy being one of them. And we hold our tryouts with our entire coaching staff. So all of our coaches will be at every level of tryout. So I'll be at the freshman tryout and the JV tryout. Jimmy will be at the varsity and the freshman tryouts. Our freshman staff will help out with the upper level tryouts, just to have as many eyes and ears on what's going on. And we have an evaluation system that goes into it, and rankings of players, and it gets pretty intricate. And Jimmy's been in those conversations with us and sit in those meetings, and it's not easy. We try to get everything out on the table as best we can and be as fair and objective as we can. And it takes a lot. A lot goes into it. I'd be lying and to tell you if I didn't have a few sleepless nights over it. It's difficult. But I think the point that you were getting to was our staff. And the main thing for me is I know that I have really good people and good baseball men, but the most important thing is that they're good people. So when we have discussions and we have back and forth and debates on players and those kinds of things, I know I'm getting an honest assessment and really a heartfelt kind of interpretation of what's going on and what we're seeing. And again, we try to be as fair as we can. And I rely on my staff for everything on a day-to-day basis to kind of filter that message down. And as you said, hopefully you'll have that paid forward with the level in which we're going forward with the players. So yeah, it's obviously integral to what we're doing.
So explain a little bit about your coaching philosophies, the culture at the high school, what they are, and how they were shaped.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for any program, you're looking for your program to play the game the right way, which involves a lot of things as far as I'm concerned. But from a culture standpoint, I usually like to break out what we do into what I call the 4 pillars of our program. It's team first, it's energy, it's accountability, and it's mental toughness. So those 4 things, I spend a lot of time talking to our players and trying to demonstrate different things that we can do to kind of reinforce those characteristics. I think that those 4 things are instrumental in great programs. I also think that in today's society, the young people, those are underdeveloped aspects and characteristics. And really long-term, which is what we're hoping to do here, those are life skills that they're going to need going forward, whether that's at the collegiate level or in life in general. So I really try to tie in whatever we're doing on a daily basis and try to reinforce those 4 pillars on a daily basis as best I possibly can. I know a lot of my players are probably sick of me saying and seeing those things around in our locker room and things like that. But I think that the message is important enough in those 4 areas to keep trying to reinforce it as much as possible.
So can you give us an example? One of the things you talk about where a lot of these traits, I guess we want to say, have been lacking with the, it seems like every year maybe it's getting a little bit worse and a little bit worse as the newer kids are coming in. So can you give an example in terms of accountability to the team, what you're talking about to the younger coaches that are out there?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a huge one. When we talk about accountability, we kind of frame it in a couple of different ways. Being accountable to your teammates is important on a daily basis when you're there, that you're given the effort that being part of a team requires and is necessary. Obviously, if you were to do something that didn't meet our standards for behavior or how we carry ourselves and whatnot, accountability would come through in ownership of that and really not making excuses for it. Those are kinds of things that we're trying to preach to our guys. You're accountable for us at our school. It's important for people to carry themselves the right way, whether that's in the classroom, on the field. So there's a lot of different ways that comes out. I'm lucky enough to work in the school where my players are, so holding them accountable on a daily basis for actions in the classroom and things like that. I want our guys to represent our program as best as possible all the time. Not easy, certainly something that requires a lot of time and effort to do, but I think it's one of the most important things that we can teach to people, and young people specifically, going forward.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts. How would you describe your coaching style?
That's a great question. Again, I think I've taken bits and pieces from different areas. I would say I would consider myself old school in kind of how I go about things. I have certain standards that I want guys to live up to. May not always be easy, but I think that it's valuable and it's worthwhile going forward. We want guys to carry themselves on the field with sportsmanship, with class. We want guys that are going to play the game the right way, play it hard, play it clean, play it fair. And we're pushing hard work, commitment, all the things that I think you would consider old school staples to sports programs and baseball. I don't consider myself a yeller or a screamer or anything like that when it comes to my style. But I think that when I tell somebody that something's going to happen, I'm usually pretty good at following through on it. I think that can go a long way, in your coaching style. But yeah, and again, I have a great staff with me that's helping me do that on a regular basis. It's not a one-man job, in my opinion. It goes into the entire program. The entire staff is helping to do that. So I think it's a combination. My style may not necessarily be the same as some of my assistant coaches or even my JV coach like Jimmy or my freshman coach. I think that works. I think it's good to have some different personalities and some different perspectives that hopefully are all funneling through to the same direction.
The last episode that we did, I was on with Trent Mongero, and he describes himself as a blue-collar type coach. And that kind of resonated with me a bit because that's the way I feel I am. You said that you don't yell. I don't yell much, but I will yell. And I think that if you put that into the right combination where you'll have those moments where they know that, look, we got to toe the line right now. And if you mix it in with putting your arm around a player and saying, hey, bud, come on, let's do this. That little mix, I think, for me, I think that works.
Yeah, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. I've definitely yelled.
I've heard you.
I've definitely yelled before. I try not to make that my means of communication, put it that way. And I think that there's time and place for all of these things that you mentioned. Put your arm around somebody to commend them for what they're doing well. I think that you have to let them know when they're doing well. You also have to let them know when they're falling short. Not always easy for people to take when, you're giving them something that they don't want to hear. It's coming from a constructive place. I mean, anybody, but especially teenagers in some cases may have a tough time separating the two, but we try to do our best to give them the good with the bad. And everybody has a little bit of a different style, I think, when it comes to communication and how to get across their message. And I think there's, like you said, definitely times and places for different things. From me, it's usually always from a place of us getting better, whether it's on the baseball field or how we carry ourselves off the field. It's always from a place of us trying to get better, regardless of how that message may come out on certain instances.
Well, yeah. Well, you also have the whole aspect if a coach, you think of more of old school coaches, and I'm sure you've seen them, maybe not recently, because I think most of that is gone, but when you were playing, the guys that were just the curmudgeonly, just yelling, it just becomes white noise and it doesn't have an impact. So if you had somebody who is a little softer spoken and a little more positive, when they do yell, it should and generally does have a much bigger impact of the player kind of snapping to attention of, oh crap, I did it. Now I'm in it. But if you're yelling all the time and it's just, yeah, whatever. It's Charlie Brown's teacher in the background.
For sure. And I definitely have played for many coaches like that back in the day. There was a fear factor there for sure. We grew up in a different time, and that's kind of the way most of the coaches dealt with us, to be honest with you. But yes, I totally agree that in anything that you're trying to communicate with somebody, if it gets to be overall the way that you communicate on a regular basis, and in a lot of cases it could be drowned out. And I also think that that's a big part of your staff. Sometimes it's great I have a great staff with me on the varsity level. My assistant coach, Coach Archiello, does an unbelievable job. Sometimes I turn it over to him. There's been days after a game where you kind of know how you're feeling, and it may not come out in the most positive way, and you may turn that over to somebody else and say, you know what, Coach Arch, you take this one and address the team. And then there's been cases where it's the other way around. So I think it's really important to kind of go back to what you said about your staff and how important they are for you.
So how do you develop trust with your players?
Well, I think that is also a two-way street. I think that for me, from my perspective, the trust from them to me, I think comes from exactly what I mentioned before, doing and following through on what I say. That if this is something that's important for us, it's something that we're going to stress and it's something we're going to emphasize, that I'm following through on that on a daily basis. And I think that builds trust. Certainly, the more time you spend with these guys, and many of these guys are in our program for 4 years, you get to know them better, and that builds over time. But I think for me, as somebody who was in a position of leadership, to kind of follow through on what you say you're going to do, I think builds trust. For them, from the other perspective, for us to trust them, again, that's a daily thing that's built. And the more times that they're doing what they're supposed to do, that where they're supposed to be, they're carrying themselves the way that we're kind of set our standard to, that builds trust alone over time. And then obviously from their end, hopefully they can trust in what we're teaching and what we're putting a lot of work in. I like to consider myself somebody who's putting in a lot of time and effort to work with them. And I think there's some trust that goes into that we're in the trenches with you every day, and we're working hard. We're spending a lot of man hours. We're spending a lot of time and effort. And I think that's one of the things that they can trust in from us.
Yeah, I think that something that you said, that, you're seeing them through their whole high school career. You see them as freshmen. You see them every day in the classroom. You get a real good chance to develop those relationships with those players, which I believe builds trust. So like for somebody like me that's not in the building and only seeing them as the 3 months that I do, it's a little harder to do. And that's why I asked that question.
I think it's definitely more of a challenge when you're not there every day. I only had 1 year where I was coaching where I wasn't teaching in the building. And that was my first year that I mentioned that I was kind of just helping out on the weekends as almost as a favor to one of my buddies. So I think that it's actually been a huge impact for us. We actually have a lot of coaches on our staff that are in the building. So we get to know these guys as students. Obviously, me being in the position that I'm in, when somebody gets in trouble or somebody does something good in the classroom or they're achieving stuff that is noteworthy, we know about it. We're invested in it. We're in contact with counselors at the school on a daily basis, the administration. So good and bad, we're really learning about these guys on a daily basis. And I think that's important. And to be honest with you, I know there's many coaches out there that don't work in the building that they coach in. And I feel like that would be a challenge for me to kind of go that route since I've been doing it this way for so long. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of extra work and an extra layer there that goes into that.
So I know, we talk a lot about your contact with these kids, and you're seeing them from freshmen and all the way through and all that. What about when the season's over? Are you running any kind of summer program? I know a lot of teams are doing their own travel team and trying to keep the kids together and all that stuff. Are you working on any of that?
Me personally, no. I do some camps at the school in the summer for different age groups. I kind of use that as a valuable tool with not only kids that are younger than high school age, but also kids that are already in our program. We value those weeks at camp where we can get to work with some guys that maybe were on the freshman level or the JV level before they get back to school in the fall. So that's really helpful. For years, my assistant coach had a summer travel program that guys from our program were playing in. And that was really comforting to me to know that they were getting great instruction during the summertime from a great baseball guy. And I think that's really what we want as a high school coach, is to have a productive summer and where guys are getting instruction, they're working hard, they're building towards something. So that was kind of invaluable for us for that period of time. But with that being said, we have fall baseball at our school. Our varsity guys are working out in the off season in the winter, lifting, that kind of thing. And then we have a spring season. So I bet if you ask them, they enjoy the break from me for a couple of months in the summer for the most part.
Well, it's one of those things where I feel like most things in life, there's a trade-off of some good and some bad, because there is a little bit of the absence making the heart grow fonder, I'm sure, to some degree on both ends of that. I know, the day the season is over, I haven't coached travel in many years. The day that the season is over, I'm relieved to have that extra time back in my life and all that. But that feeling fades pretty quick, where then all of a sudden, like, hey, I wonder what, little Johnny's doing and how's this guy doing, so kind of tough to keep on it. And again, it's a double-edged sword where maybe it's a good thing that they get a taste of somebody else's philosophies and somebody else's style of coaching, but it's also this creature that you're helping to mold, not just as a player, but as a person. And if they're going in the wrong direction, now when they come back to you, it's tough to kind of balance that out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got its ups and downs, and like you said, some pros and cons either way. I think the separation part of it, a lot of times people forget that baseball is a team sport. A lot of what's been going on in baseball recently has gotten very individualized. So the separation where our guys are playing for different teams and doing that kind of stuff, I think is good to get away from each other, have some other experiences, like you said, but building that team aspect of it is something that, you got to get back to when you get back to school. And like I said, we're lucky enough to have fall baseball and a lot of time to kind of cultivate that relationship and that team kind of aspect. So I do think it can work both ways, but that togetherness that you're hoping for from a group and from a team, like you said, in some cases being away may help that. In some cases, there's some work to do when you return and you get back to it.
Yeah, definitely. What so for your fall program, we mentioned that a couple of times. So is that essentially just taking, last year's JV team becomes essentially the team that you're going to work with in the fall? I mean, obviously there'll be some crossover between returning varsity players. I don't know what percentage of your kids usually graduate from your team, but are you bringing them up, or are you just kind of keep taking everybody together? How do you run your fall program?
Yeah, it's a great question because the fall is really a great time. One of the times I love the most of the year, obviously getting back to it, but you get great weather in the fall here, which is always a plus. For us, we have one varsity level program in the fall. What that entails for us is anyone who's a sophomore, junior, and senior entering that year can try out for that team. So we still have to hold tryouts. We still have to make cuts. And because it's one team, you have a big group of guys that are coming out for that team. And trying to cut that down is, again, very difficult. So you will have a mix of grades there. We actually graduated a lot from our team last year, so the fall will be a really important time for us. But because there's no playoffs and no actual standings or anything like that in the fall, it's really a great instructional time for us, a really good developmental time for us to get to work with these guys, really kind of focus in on improvement, kind of lay the groundwork for things that we need to do in the off season for individual players and gear us up towards the spring. So I really enjoy the fall. I think it's a great time for us as a program, and in reality for the kids to kind of get a gauge of where they are, see what they need to improve on going forward, kind of put a plan together to develop over the off season and lead us into the spring.
So that's a good launching pad for what I wanted to go into next. Why don't you take us through like a typical practice in the fall, spring? Just take us through a typical practice. How does it go?
We kind of try to stick with a lot of routines. I think that's important for any team, but for younger baseball players and teams, I think building a routine is important. So for us, and we're lucky enough, we work with a strength and conditioning company that has kind of taken over our off-season stuff, and they've given us some great tools to warm up and to stretch and to get ourselves ready to go, kind of prep for what we're doing. So once we get that rolling, Harrington Performance, by the way, is the company that do a great job with us. They set a warm-up routine that these guys will stick to religiously every single day. And then we get into our catch play, which has a really strict routine to it. I call it a throwing progression. I don't even like calling it catch play because it's so important for us. The kids are probably tired of me saying this too, but I always tell them this is the first drill of the day. We have a throwing progression that we go to, and I'm constantly harping on the fact that you can't play defense unless you can throw and catch, and that's the first thing that kind of sets the tone for that. So that part of our day will start the same, no matter when it is, that warm up and that throwing progression. And then we'll have different things that we want to do. We'll have station work for defensive drills and offensive drills. We like to keep guys moving around, not have guys standing around while things are going on. So we'll have them moving to different stations. I usually like to incorporate some sort of base running station into whatever we're doing, whether that be right after we warm up, whether that be at the end of practice. I'm really putting an emphasis on base running. One of the areas that I think young ball players need to improve on the most. So we're hitting that every day for sure. And then we typically will have some things that we want to work on based off of the time of year or something we haven't been doing so well. We'll sit down as a staff and we'll put a game plan together for each day's practice, and what areas we want to hit on and make sure that we're doing that in a productive way. I love adding in something that's a little competitive throughout the course of the day and the week. The kids get into that for sure. Usually tells us a little something about the players who's competitive. And I think a lot of times that kind of pushes the game speed reps that we're kind of searching for on a daily basis to make sure that they're working at a speed and a pace that is going to translate to a game. So that's kind of typically the way things will go. We kind of break things down into like individual work and you know, whether it's team defense or team stuff. But we have a practice plan mapped out for each day. They're not all the same. They usually typically start and end the same, but that routine will be consistent. And then what we're trying to kind of emphasize that day will take hold of it.
So one of the things that I've mentioned a lot on the show is our situation with not getting the full field all of the time because of lacrosse and the fields, the way they're set up. Give a little bit about that, because I've tried to explain it to people to understand how you have to try and be creative. So go through how you can be very creative with that situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some cases it can be a challenge, but I try to look at the positives of it. I mean, we have a turf field where a lot of teams are getting rained out of practice or not being able to get out there. I feel like I can do a lot in a small space. I grew up here in the Northeast. I've had tons of practices as a player and as a coach inside. So I feel like that's one of our strengths, to be honest with you, of maximizing any space that we do have. We know when we look at the week, which days we don't have a full field, which days we do. We know whether we're going to be stuck inside or be able to kind of mix and match inside and outside based off of the weather. And we'll formulate a plan that way. You know, the way our field is, when we call it a quote unquote half field, we have an entire infield. We have basically half an outfield, and we have batting cages on our campus, both indoor and outdoor. So to me, it's just a matter of planning it out and mapping it out. And, you know, then we can go from there. If I was stuck in a gym for practice, I feel like we can get a lot out of it just because I've been doing it so long, and we can kind of maximize our space and time in that standpoint. Like I said, I'm much more happy to have a turf field, maybe not with a full diamond or a full outfield, than, you know, have a field that's underwater for 2 or 3 days and not be able to get out there. Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of really setting aside some time, really looking into, you know, how you can maximize that space and getting the most out of it. And honestly, I think our players have adjusted to that very well. They're used to the way we kind of will jump into any space that we have and get work done. So, you know, it's one of those things. You do the best with what you have, and I'm more than happy with what we do have.
Yeah, I think that was important to bring out so that youth coaches, lower level coaches understand that you don't necessarily need a full field, full diamond. You could do so many things with smaller spaces, parking lots, gymnasiums. There's so many things that you could do, but you have to be creative.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years where we were taking fly balls in a parking lot years ago, you know, before we had a turf field. I like I said, I think just I've been in the Northeast for so long. I remember college practices. You're getting back to school in early January, and there's feet of snow on the ground, and you're stuck in a gym. And you take things like that. You know, what were things that we did in this small space here, and how can you adjust it? How can you modify it? Maybe we have a little bit more space than we had with that, and we can get a little bit more out of this drill. Maybe we have a little bit less space, and how can we kind of scale that down a little bit? So I think there is an element of creativity to it, but it's also, you know, experience of doing it. I know I mentioned my assistant coach, Coach Arch. He grew up in this area too. He played college baseball in Springfield, Massachusetts. So he's had plenty of time inside with practices. I really feel like that's one of our strengths, that we can get a whole ton of work done in a small area, but even in a small time if we had to.
How are you balancing out? Like you talked about when you started coaching, you had small kids. I don't know how old your kids are at this point, but how did you balance out that whole family life with coaching? Did your kids go to your school, and did you have any of the at least you were in the same place at the same time type of thing?
Not easy, as any coach will tell you. I think the first thing is having an understanding wife. Yeah, you know, I've actually known her almost my entire life, and baseball's never not been a part of it. So she knows that that's part of me, and she knows how important it is to me. So I think that helps a lot. My kids are not that old. My kids are only 14 and going to be 11. So yeah, it's a balancing act. I try to do the best I can to be as present as possible. Obviously, there's a lot of pull from the responsibilities of doing what I do, but they've been great about it. My son, as he's gotten older, has been around the team a lot, specifically the last few years as he's gotten older. And, he brings his glove, and these guys have been great to him over the last several years and throw him some ground balls, throw him some fly balls, and really make him feel like a part of the team. So that's been a great experience for me to have him around as I'm doing this. Hopefully he's picking something up along the way, which would be great. But I think when you have good people around on both ends, people that you work with and at home, that makes it a lot easier. But yeah, I try to do the best that I can, and I'm balancing it as good as I can, as good as I'd like to anyway. Put it that way.
It really is a tough balancing act. I mean, let's face it, I've been doing it for many years, and to throw in high school with the travel, it was a year-round proposition. And yes, if you don't have that support on both ends, then it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most difficult part, nowadays is if there's a game that I can't get to of my sons or my daughters or something like that, just because of our schedule. That's probably the most difficult part for me right now. They're kind of right in that prime age of doing these things, and you want to be there. And I get to a large majority of them, but when you have to miss one, it's tough. But I think that's probably the most difficult part right now.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I can say I'm lucky enough that I didn't have to go through that. But yeah, I can't imagine how I know I'd be. And Dave, I'm sure you're the same way. If my son had a game and I couldn't be there, I'd be chomping at the bit. So that's got to be tough.
Especially if you're at a bunch of other people's kids' games. That's
exactly.
Yeah, that's the tough thing.
Yeah, that's definitely something that is happening more often and difficult. I'm not sure if everybody kind of appreciates that fact, but it's certainly out there right now. And like I said, probably the most difficult part of doing what I do right now.
So one of the other things that I wanted to get into with you, and we seem to kind of move in this direction with a lot of people that we talk to on the show, is how do you think travel ball is affecting high school ball?
Well, I mean, travel ball right now and the summer scene is so prominent that it's something that you certainly have to account for. I think that there is a whole gamut of possibilities. And I think it comes down to the same thing I brought up before. You really want your kids, my own kids, and the kids that play for me around good people. And I think with the amounts of teams and programs and things that are out there now, I guess you run the risk of maybe that not being the case all the time. So I think if you're surrounding yourself with good people that have good intentions and they're in this for the right reasons, for the kids to grow as ball players and as people and the development that goes along with that, then I think it could be great. I think it could be a fun time for the kids. I think it could be a real developmental thing. It can actually be a great family thing where families are traveling together to these events. I think where you kind of hit a stumbling block is when the kids or the parents or the families are around people that are in it for the wrong reasons. And I think that's where a lot of the issues are popping up. And just like anything else, when you put massive amounts of people that are involved in something, you run the risk of some people that are in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot on here. I'm sure the main thing that you're thinking of is just the money in terms of that. And, we're not calling out anybody specifically on here, but we talk about it all the time, how much of I was going to say necessary evil it is, but I don't know how necessary it is. There are programs out there. There's very well-run programs that it's not costing somebody $5,000 for 4 months or something, but it is something that is it's so prevalent. There's almost no way to get around it other than starting up your own program in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're looking at a situation that it's almost like a buyer beware thing. You have to kind of see what's out there and what's going into these programs. Obviously, the money is huge, and trust me, for a high school teacher, my son kind of getting to this age and seeing what some of these prices are and costs and fees, it's definitely an eye opener. I think the main thing is you're getting people that are kind of caught up in, am I missing out on something that other people are doing because they're paying this fee or because they're involved in this program or that program? And I think that's kind of driving the industry. People don't want to miss out. They want to make sure that they're giving their kid the best opportunity that they can. And a lot of times, maybe that may not necessarily be what's best for that individual or that family or that group of kids or whatever the case may be. I think it's important for people to make their own decisions, maybe not necessarily what somebody else might be doing or somebody that they know is doing, and kind of get caught in there. I have to make sure that I'm putting my kid in the same situation as somebody else. I think there's different levels of programs. There's different expenses that are associated with each of them. And I think for different people, different situations may be better for them than others.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind with the travel ball is I feel that a lot of these organizations are so caught up in playing in the tournaments and playing games that they're losing sight of the fact that if you were able to put together a program where they practiced a lot and they played games every now and then just to see the result of what they're doing in practice, I think the cost could be brought down quite a bit. I mean, some of these organizations playing 9, 10, 11 tournaments throughout the summer, that's very, very pricey. I've seen tournaments now that are $3,000 entry fees into these tournaments, which is insane. So it's driving the cost up. Whereas, like I said, if you took a team, rented a field, which is relatively inexpensive for a couple hours, practice with them more and played in a couple of tournaments, I think it would probably be a better world, and it would probably serve the purpose better where the kids would actually develop.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not even factoring the cost of travel and accommodations and eating out and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. Yeah, I think the timeline can be skewed for a lot of people, and I think that's kind of the problem of what we're seeing. Everyone gets kind of caught up in the exposure aspect of this, the baseball end of this in the summer. Some kids are not ready for that. They may not be ready physically for that. They may not be ready from a skill standpoint. But because others may be doing these kinds of things, they kind of feel that pressure to do that maybe a little before they're ready. And again, I don't want to tell anybody what to do for their individual kid. You may be in a different scenario than my own kid or kids that I coach or whatever it is. But, I think that timeline has kind of been rushed in a lot of cases. And to be honest with you, some of it is not their fault. I mean, you're seeing kids committing at crazy ages now, these verbal commitments, and they feel the pressure of that. I get where they're coming from, but I think it's important to kind of keep in perspective that, everybody is different. People are developing at different rates, especially the teenage level, 12, 13, 14 years old, 15 years old. So it's important for people to kind of keep that perspective of what's good for some may not necessarily be good for others.
One of the things that I've noticed this summer in particular, because I stopped coaching travel baseball, I didn't do it, but I was still in touch with a lot of players that I had coached in the past. The one thing, and you just said it, about trying to get these verbal commits and trying to get noticed and all of this. So these kids are understanding, I'm going to use pitching as an example, that if you want to get noticed by a D1 school, you better be throwing 90, 95, and that's all the kids are worried about. They're all worried about what's my velocity. But meanwhile, they can't pitch. They can't throw a strike. And, so it confuses me sometimes. How did this get all turned around like that, where nobody that's coaching them or training them is saying, listen, buddy, it doesn't matter how hard you throw the ball if you can't throw a strike.
Frustrating, right?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. This is a conversation that, I know me and you have had, and obviously the rest of our staff. From our perspective, we're stressing certain things on the mound, and it all starts with the ability to throw strikes. But again, this kind of going back to my point before, I don't necessarily put all the blame on one end, because this is what's getting rewarded. So there's an aspect of that when they see certain things getting rewarded, like hitting a number on a radar gun, they're getting pushed to that. And you got guys on the other end that are trying to develop the pitching aspect of it as opposed to the throwing aspect of it. And there can be a little tug of war there. So I get it. It's one of the things that we're trying to work against on a daily basis. We want our guys to be able to pitch, command the ball, as they grow physically. And obviously we do things that we're going to work with guys to hopefully develop. gain velocity over time, and when you build strength and those kinds of things, it's kind of one of those things like the chicken or the egg, which is first. But again, I think a lot of that comes from the pressure that is being placed on what's being rewarded. And I think it's important for people to have that philosophy of what they want to do and which way they want to attack it. And for us, we're trying to build guys that can develop as pitchers. And then hopefully as time goes on and physical maturity happens, we can work towards building the other stuff that goes along with it.
So when you mentioned about kids kind of getting ready for college or thinking that they're ready for college ball and all that, as the head coach of a prominent program in our area that's had a lot of success, are you getting contacted regularly by any college coaches in terms of, maybe the player reached out to them and they're looking for some feedback from you on what kind of, not just player they are, but what kind of person they are? Is there much of any contact?
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. I think that there's a process in place that we like to work with as long as this is going in the right direction. I know the showcase scene is a big thing now too, is kind of goes along with what we were talking about. From my perspective, I like our kids to get to the school camps and prospect camps that they're interested in. So they're making sure that those staff, that staff at that school is able to see them. We'll follow up with emails or texts or phone calls to facilitate that contact as best we can. A lot of times the interest that you're getting is kind of like a telltale sign. When you're getting interest from a certain level of program, then that's kind of where you're fitting in. We'll see development as time goes on. We'll try to adjust those sites as best we can. And throughout this process, we talk to our players. And for me, it's kind of like putting a puzzle together with them and the family. We want to make sure that there's an academic fit first and foremost at a school. Some kids are already have in their mind stuff that they want to study, that they want to major in. So we can kind of look at schools from that standpoint. Some kids really want to get away from home. Some kids really want to stay close to home. For some kids, they're really emphasizing, the baseball end of it. But for us, we're trying to kind of put those pieces together and find the best possible fit that we can. Hopefully, we're putting these kids in positions where it's a place that they're going to be happy. They're going to be happy at and hopefully stay at and, get a degree and hopefully have a great baseball experience along the way. But I think you got to, again, kind of prioritize what's important. And for us, with student athletes, the academic fit is really important for us. And then obviously piecing that together with location, finances, the baseball end of it. It's a challenge in a lot of cases, but it's something that's really rewarding. When one of our players was going on to play at the next level and going to a school that he dreamed about or he loves and he's visited and is having a great experience there. And to me, that's, nothing better than that.
That's awesome. So with that, in terms of, we're talking about players and choosing schools that they go to, you guys are in a obviously wildly different environment than I was in, because just being a quote unquote, like a regular high school coach, where we had the players that lived in our area that were available to us. So what, if any, type of recruiting do you do, or what kind of looking around are you doing at getting additional players into your program?
Well, I think for us, the main thing is we want people to be aware of our school and what it has to offer from an academic standpoint. Our school is a top-notch academic school. From an extracurricular standpoint, we have an unbelievable sports program, but there's so much more that goes into it than that. There's something for every kid to do at Stepinac, whether it's baseball or sports related or otherwise. We have a great drama program. We have tons of different activities and clubs for kids to be involved in outside of the sports realm. Our alumni network is unbelievable. One of the best things about our school is the connection that the alumni has to our school. A lot of people may cut a check to a school as an alum and that kind of thing. And we certainly have people that are very generous. But one of the biggest things is our alumni are present. They're at our events. They're on our boards. They're on our committees. They're really invested and hands-on. And I think that really says a lot about the school that we work in and that we're around every day and the experience that people had there. So I think for me, it's about exposing a 7th and 8th grader, their parents, or wherever it is to what the school has to offer. And I think that's kind of the best recruiting tool that we can have. Sure, we hold our camps and clinics and things like that where baseball players can come and get a feel for not only me, but my staff and how we do things, get to know other kids that may be coming to the school here in the near future. And that all helps, certainly. We have various events that are going on at the school, like open houses and visits and tours and things like that, that other schools are certainly doing too. But to me, I think that exposing them to what the school has to offer is the most important thing. We think we have a lot to offer to young people and their families, and kind of where the future has taken a lot of our past students. So I think that's the most important thing for us, and kind of keeping that focus on that realm of it.
Excellent.
I really just had one other thing that I wanted to get into, and it's kind of like a tricky question. So it's something that I want to start doing, and you're my guinea pig. So, yeah.
That is a little scary. I'm not going to
lie. It's really a simple question, but how has failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
So I think that growth in anything that you do comes from some failure. And I think if you're a coach, you should be, and I hope that I am, always willing to learn. So yeah, I mean, there's things that you do on a daily basis that sometimes you say, oh, man, I wish I would have done that differently. I don't know if I would pinpoint one specific story, but doing what we do, and it's a constantly evolving kind of environment. Like I said, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and it's definitely different than it was 20 years ago when I started. And I'm also a much different person. I was a young kid, single, and not have any kids of my own, to now I'm an old man, and I have kids of my own, and a different position at the school. Like, a lot has changed. And I think adaptability is important. If you're kind of the same person that you were 20 years ago, I think that would be a failure in itself. So I think that, I don't know if it's one specific thing, but I think over the course of years and doing a job, you learn from things as you go. You certainly make mistakes. And to be honest with you, one of the things that's kind of prepared me for that is being an athlete as a kid, and being a part of a team, and dealing with failure when it presented itself, or kind of facing adversity and kind of building resiliency. All these are kind of buzzwords that you hear, but I actually think that that's one of the most important things of sports, especially at the youth level, for me at the high school level, where you can kind of build that resiliency, that little bit of toughness, and kind of know that you can bounce back when things didn't go your way. I know there's some examples when you're coaching and you had a season and it really looks bleak. It looks like you've hit a rough patch, and sometimes it looks like it's not going to turn around. And my approach has always been, I'm going to continue to show up. I'm going to continue to work. I'm going to do whatever I possibly can to turn the ship around and get it going in the right direction. And that's all I've ever known. That's the only way I've ever known to attack it. And that's kind of the approach that I take. And I think that that's something that was built by being an athlete and being involved in sports my whole life. And I don't know if you get that from too many other things in life, especially as a young kid. So I think that that's really probably an important lesson that you're constantly learning and building off of, but that was instilled early on, and something that I still rely on today.
Well, I got to say that I love that you said that, because that was something that you actually taught me, was about when things weren't going right and maybe the ship needed to be righted and I was struggling. You were right, because it usually turned around and everything worked out. So, yeah, very good point.
Well, I appreciate that I was helpful. I don't know if you remember this, but I mentioned this at our dinner. Sometimes the timetable that you have in your mind is not necessarily the way it's going to work out. And I think that's something that's important for a lot of people to realize, especially parents of our young kids and things like that. Sometimes everyone wants that instant gratification. Sometimes the timetable is not how you scripted it or how you thought it would be. But my kind of experience is that if you stay the course and you keep working and you're doing the right things, keep doing those things over and over again, we keep pushing, that things will turn around. And sometimes it requires some patience. Sometimes it requires some extra push. Sometimes it requires some thick skin. Sometimes it requires a lot of different things that hopefully you build up over time of doing this. So yeah, I think that, that's an important lesson, for everybody. And something I'm learning and everyone's learning day by day, and you're just hoping you continue to get better at it.
I mean, I know we covered a lot of different directions here. Did you have anything else specific you wanted to get into, Keith?
No, I want to thank you guys for having me. Number one, I've seen your list of guests, and that's an impressive list. I'm hoping that I brought something to the table for you guys and the listeners. And again, appreciative for the opportunity you guys having me on.
No, it was a pleasure to have you here. You definitely brought a lot to us. We appreciate everybody's time is valuable. As much as I said in the beginning that this is your downtime. So we really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to spend with us here. It is very appreciated. I'm sure that our listeners are going to like it and be able to learn a lot from it. So, we thank you for coming on, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your couple of weeks here before the craziness starts up again.
Yeah, I will make the most of it. I can promise you that. But we always kind of have our eye on the next thing and the excitement of getting started. So we're looking forward to that too. I'm going to enjoy the next couple of weeks with my family and get back ready to go. Look forward to getting back to work with Jimmy and the rest of the guys, and hopefully have another successful year.
So Keith, why don't you give our listeners some contact information where they could reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. So our school website is stepinac.org, stepinac.org. Ton of information about our school and our athletic program there. And you can follow us on Instagram at Stepinac Baseball and on Twitter at @step_baseball. Always putting out up-to-date content on the program and the school and things that are going on there. You can find my email address on the website as well if anybody had any questions for me. But other than that, again, thank you guys, and appreciate you having me on.
All right, it's been our pleasure.
So, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I think it was a great conversation. There's a lot of information for our listeners to use, and I guess I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Before you know it, right? We'll be right back at it.
It's amazing. To me, it feels like the season just ended, and now here we are a couple of weeks from going again.
I know, it flew by. You get used to that kind of quick break, let me tell you. But it's something you got to take advantage of when you can get it.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
All righty, Keith. So thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
All right, guys. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. Words from the boss, Keith Richardson, head coach at Stepinac High School. What'd you think, Jimmy? And keep in mind, he might hear this.
I got to tell you something. Like I said before we started the show, that I thought it was a good idea to give a little bit of a little peek inside the program at the high school, and I think Keith explained it well. I think that most of the stuff that he talked about, is stuff that I would say that almost any program would want, but here we are, we're living it. So
yeah, it's nice to get a glimpse into that, and it's interesting in terms of even the dynamic of where you fall because of being the JV coach, so if a kid comes into the school, most of the kids are coming in as freshmen. So it's another coach, then it's Coach Phil and Jerry, and then hand it off to Coach Richardson there. So it's just kind of interesting to think of it in that terms. A lot of stuff we talk about and looking at what draws a kid to go to that kind of program. And, while a private school, there's certainly some parallels with a college program, wildly different in that they're not going to see the coach that recruited them for 2 or 3 years, before they get up there. So definitely interesting to get his perspective on what he's looking for and how he runs his program.
Right. And let's face it, it's my job and it's the freshman coach's job to prepare these kids for him, and all of the things that he talked about in terms of his pillars and what he expects out of his players and the respect. It's our job to build that foundation for him. If we can get that done, then he's going to be able to take it to greater heights.
Yeah, so go to stepinac.org. That's STEPINAC, stepinac.org. You can find out all about the school itself and obviously look into the baseball program, you can reach out to Coach. You can always reach out to Coach Phil and Jerry. You know that we love hearing from you guys. You can reach out to us, reach out directly to Coach Richardson, find out a little bit more about the program. Obviously, we can't say enough good things about it here. If you've got a young player that is looking to go to the next level, this is a great stepping stone to get you up into a college program. And with that, just want to remind you, please go ahead and give us a rating, give us a review, give us 5 stars, whatever the case may be, and whatever on Apple or iTunes or wherever you're hearing us. Reach out to us. We're at clearingthebases@gmail.com is our email address. You can catch us on Twitter at the CTB Show, now known as X. I will probably forever call it Twitter, at the CTB Show. And let us know what you think. If you have any ideas for future shows, we've got a lot. We are jam-packed here over the next couple of weeks, but as we get into the winter months, things will open up here for us a little bit. So give us some ideas if you're interested in coming on. If you are a coach, a high school coach, a college coach, pro coach, whatever the case may be, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. If you have any questions about the fundamentals that these higher level coaches are looking for, just remember it all begins with 2 things, and that's effort and attitude. Have a PMA, positive mental attitude, give 100% effort in everything you do, and good things will follow. Final thoughts, Coach?
You know, Dave, I'd like to think back quite a few years ago when I was coaching travel baseball, youth baseball only, and kind of had a goal to eventually become a high school coach. But I thought because of the situation where typically teachers become coaches, that it was something that I would probably never be able to achieve. So I really can't thank Keith enough for, I guess, having the faith in me, believing that I could do this job for his school, for his program. And really, I mean, I don't want to say make a wish come true, but make something that I thought was never possible. So I really can't thank Keith enough for that. And one of the great parts about being a coach at Stepinac High School is everybody at Stepinac, the whole coaching staff, and, you know, Keith explained a lot about the coaching staff, you know, while he was speaking, but the whole coaching staff knows that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.